the classes that you take as an undergraduate business major, I'm not sure I totally agree that there should be undergraduate business majors. In today's day and age, different topic. I think maybe a liberal arts education where you really learn how to think and write is probably more important. When my parents were moving out of their house, I found some of my old notebooks, and we took classes in like Salesforce management and insurance and, labor law, which honestly, when you're 19, you're just memorizing, writing an essay about why you would use a direct sales force versus a broker sales force. It's just words.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Duchan, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Palacio and Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Lori Marcus. Lori is an executive coach with Crenshaw Associates in New York City, where she coaches Fortune 500 C-suites and high-potential executives. And she is a keynote speaker on the topic of building culture. Lori built a successful 24-year career with PepsiCo, holding national and global senior vice president and general management roles, and earlier, vice president of marketing and brand management roles. Before joining PepsiCo, she served as an account director for a division of Nielsen Marketing Research. She is the co-author of the book, You Should Smile More: How to Dismantle Gender Bias in the Workplace. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Lori.
Lori, welcome to the Corporate Couch this morning.
Thank you, Jeff. Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, very excited to talk to you. You're another introduction by the famous Dr. Cindy McGovern, the First Lady of Sales. So very, very grateful for her. If I actually paid the guests or was making money on my podcast, I would give her a referral fee. So there you go, Cindy. But no, very excited to talk to you. You've had an iconic career. You were in the Pepsi, Coke, Cola Wars back in the heyday, and doing some great things. Author, part of the band, the Sisters, co-founder. We're going to get into that because that's just phenomenal. The 6 female corporate rock stars that you have there. And but yeah, let's start with something fun though. What you're out there and keynote speaking, author, social media, but even people that know you fairly well, Lori, what thing would surprise them about you?
What would surprise them about me? Probably that I start my day with equal parts. Most people who know me know that I'm kind of an exercise freak. So, early in the morning, I'm either out there running or I'm on my Peloton bike. The thing that would surprise people is before I get out there and do that hour of exercise, I have likely had a tube of M&Ms. So I have M&Ms in if I reach down right now into my tote bag next to me, there would be a tube of M&Ms. So I'm kind of equal part like health nut, exercise freak. And I think I have the world's biggest sweet tooth that there is. So
that's funny. So that's your daily guilty pleasure, I guess.
Yeah, I would say over the course of the day, I go through probably one of the large or long tubes of M&Ms, which of course I refill. Yeah. It's a really good sort of, it's excellent that, with the tube, it doesn't get crushed in your tote bag or whatever. And so that's my guilty sort of my sweet of choice. And I don't even like to use the word guilty pleasure because I just enjoy chocolate.
Yeah. Well, you look very healthy and fit. I know we're on Zoom or actually Riverside, but And my philosophy for starting in my probably 20s was, if you eat right 20 80% of the time.
Yes.
Do whatever you want the next
Yes.
20%. So I think,
Absolutely.
I'm being Italian and, this carb, stuff, I have to have pasta, I have to have pizza, but
You have to. You must.
I have
You
to,
must. Yes.
wash it down with a little glass of vino. It's all good.
Exactly. I prefer to only read the studies. I used to work at Keurig, but I prefer to only read the studies that talk about how coffee is good for you and you should never give up coffee. I feel like that's part of our religion, and also like life is too short to only eat kale.
Right.
Come on, come on. Right. And we,
Exactly.
you can edit this out if you want, but it's funny. My husband and I joke sometimes, we've been married for 35 years. We joke about like we're both coffee people. We're like high coffee achievers. And I always wonder, like, could I have lasted 35 years in a marriage with someone who didn't drink coffee? Because it's such an important ritual for us. And we've been traveling a lot. We've been going to a lot of friends, kids, weddings. And we were just actually at one in Chicago, and we stopped in a CVS or a Walgreens to get something. And we saw, the new collab between Hershey's and Mondelez. And they're doing, I hope I get this right, like Oreo flavored Reese's cups. Wow. And then I think they might also be doing Reese's flavored Oreos. And literally they were like 2 for $2. And of course we bought them, tasted them. I snapped a picture, sent it to a former colleague who's the chief commercial officer at Hershey's. I was like, hey, Stacy, we're trying this. And so I was like, I wonder what it would be like to be married to someone who didn't drink coffee and didn't also really love going to a drugstore and buying chocolate.
I love it. It's funny you say that. I grew up, my ethnicity is Italian, and, they big coffee drinkers, but I really never drank it growing up.
Yeah.
And occasionally in my 20s and 30s, when I had moved to Kansas City, when I went back to New York to visit my family, after dinner, we'd go at a restaurant, and, my uncle Dino loved espresso with Sambuca. So I got to like espresso and Sambuca together. That's a powerhouse combination. But I got remarried and met my current wife in 2009, and I started drinking coffee with her. And so it's been a social thing. And
Yeah.
And you talk about studies too, and it's like you can find studies like every other week. The studies change. Coffee's good for you. Next week, coffee's bad. Same thing with wine. I don't know. I mean, whatever.
Yeah, I just don't engage. I feel like one of my greatest joys in life is coming down early in the morning and having coffee.
Yeah.
Full stop.
I love that. Lori, where'd you grow up, and what was fun for you growing up? What'd you love doing?
Yeah, I grew up in northern New Jersey, so about 20 miles outside of New York City. Grew up in a very kind of an average American town, kind of Leave It to Beaver, if you know that reference. Playing hopscotch on the street and tag and red light, green light, 1, 2, 3, and all that. We lived in a real neighborhood, and I was very fortunate. I grew up in a small family, just my sister, myself, and my parents, and we were a close family. Very close, a lot of yelling in the house, but a very close family. But I think the thing that I really enjoyed doing more than anything was hanging out with my friends. And we still, to this day, 50 years later or whatever it is, we still have a group chat. Our little town we grew up in is called Emerson. So we have a little chat called E-Girls, and we use that word intentionally because we got to know each other when we were 6. And it's a really beautiful thing that, we were there for each other when we were little. We didn't have money, so we weren't going on fancy vacations. There was no social media. We just hung around together all the time. We walked everywhere. We'd sit in each other's houses and with an album cover singing Bruce Springsteen songs over and over and over again. And so I feel like it was a very sort of simple, if you will, but meaningful childhood. And I feel so grateful all these decades later that those women are such an important part of my life.
Yeah. So in our era, and probably even today, you couldn't grow up in New York or New Jersey, especially New Jersey, without being a Springsteen fan. How many times have you seen Springsteen in concert?
I can't even count. I cannot even count. Probably the first concert I ever went to was at the Garden. I was probably still in high school. I think we sat in the very last row, like the highest
In the
row
blue seats, in
possible.
the blue heaven.
Yeah, at the Garden.
Yeah.
And, we saw Billy Joel at the Garden. And then
Yeah.
a couple of years ago, a friend of mine had last minute tickets to go see Bruce Springsteen at, I'm going to say the Meadowlands. We don't say the Meadowlands anymore. I guess we say MetLife. Is that right?
MetLife, right?
And and it was just, it was kind of amazing. We had much better seats this time around, and because we could pay up a little bit for the seats, but it was just incredible over I don't know, probably a 40 plus year span, more than that, how many times I've had the chance to see Bruce and Billy. It's incredible.
Yeah, both of them are the consummate performers, especially Springsteen. I saw him in Kansas City maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah.
His last tour, and he still played for 2 hours and 45 minutes. But, he's known for 3+ hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and, his band takes a break. He stays out there. I mean, he's just incredible.
He's unbelievable. You talk about somebody who's dedicated to their craft. And it's funny because when I watch Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel's a little bit of the same thing. If you've seen the Bobby Darin show on Broadway, the one with Jonathan Groff, and you watch some of these people and I think, gosh, these people love what they're doing. Like obviously they're getting paid well to do it, but there's something that goes beyond it. It's just like, it's a joy, and it's not effortlessness because they are putting a lot of effort into what they're doing, but you could just tell they're having fun. It's like, I'll use a Kansas City reference, is when your guy, Travis Kelce, and his brother are on their podcast together, and you see it on YouTube or Instagram.
Right.
And obviously they're getting paid well to do this, but those guys are having such a good time doing what they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's it's a joy and a good learning experience when you see people who have figured out how to spend their days doing something that really brings them joy.
Yeah. I read Springsteen's autobiography. It's fantastic. And he's a great writer. So, think about songwriting. So
of course.
But he, like that guy, like he had no other plan. Like he just, I mean, that was it. Like he didn't want to go to college. I think he barely got through high school.
Yeah.
But he was just, he was just, as all family dynamics, growing up, he had shit going on. But it's just amazing. We can probably do a whole hour on Bruce Springsteen.
Let's just do a whole hour on Springsteen. Maybe a little Billy Joel.
And a Billy Joel shout out. There's a documentary on Max HBO. It's about 5.5 hours, 2 parts.
Yeah,
it's great. I mean, it's fantastic.
It's also, by the way, and then I promise we can get off of this, but I think what's amazing about the Billy Joel documentary is it isn't this like ode to Billy Joel, like how fabulous he is. I mean, it's kind of raw in terms of a lot of the things that he went through in his life, and really brings people in on that. I learned so much watching that documentary. I also like, just to bring it full circle, there was a lot of Bruce Springsteen, Lil Jackson Brown, people doing
Jackson Brown,
the talkovers, and I appreciated sort of the way that they honor each other, respect each other. I mean, it's beyond the point of being competitive.
Well, and I think for me, and I grew up a big Billy Joel fan as well as Bruce, but for me, is the impact his first wife had on his career. I mean, like I don't think he goes where he ended up without her. I never knew anything about that. So
same. No idea. I knew about Christy Brinkley, and
like everybody did. You're like, why did she marry Billy Joel? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But we go on. Christy still loves him. You can tell. Like she was breaking up, while they were interviewing her, talking about him. I mean, anyhow.
Yeah.
So what was fun? Well, we talked about what was fun, but when you were like 10 or 11 years old, Lori, did you have aspirations? Hey, when I'm a grown up, I want to be this.
It's funny. I think I struggled the other way, which was, so I was a good student. I think partially because I was a good student, not to sound like Yogi Berra. My parents were also of that generation that you were expected to make straight A's. My sister was a straight A student. So she's 2 years older. I was expected to be a straight A student, the kind of thing where if you came home with a 95, my dad would say, what happened to the other 5 points? Sort of very stereotypical And anyway, what I worried about, I knew I wanted to go to college just because that's kind of what was expected. My dad had gone to college. Separate story. My mom went back and got, I'm going to cry. My mom went back and got her degree when I was in college.
Oh, wow.
She went to, she never went to college. She went to secretarial school, as many women of her generation did.
Right.
And then when I was in college, actually, she went off to Bergen Community College, and she ended up over a 10-year period, got her associate's degree. And she actually, I really am going to cry. She actually got her associate's degree when I was like 7 months pregnant with my first daughter.
Wow.
So back in 1994. And, but anyway, but my dad went to college, his father went to college. I mean, we were just sort of expected that's what you did. What I worried about, quite honestly, Jeff, was I didn't have a thing that I always wanted to be. My mom thought I should be a lawyer, but I'm a very slow and deliberate reader. If you're not a fast reader, it'd be very hard to get through.
Right.
Law school, I'm a decent writer, but I don't love to write. So maybe law school was out of the picture. I'm terrible at memorizing things. So biology and science wouldn't have worked well. So I don't think I was going to be a doctor. I had nothing that was like the obvious thing that I wanted to do. I was good at math, but not enough that I was going to be like an actuary or something. I was good in French, and I'm like, am I going to be a translator? Like, I had no idea what I was going to do. And my parents, being like very middle class, they didn't believe in just getting a liberal arts education and then you would figure it out. They were very much like, you have to go to college and graduate with a degree in something that you could get hired in. Right. And so I kind of had these thoughts of like, I don't know, maybe I'll go into advertising. I don't think I really knew what that meant, but it seemed like It was something that if you were mildly creative and smart and hardworking and you liked consumer and pop culture. So I kind of went off to college really having no idea what I wanted to do. And in a sense, maybe that's good because rather than being so pre-programmed in high school, I took the classes that you were supposed to take. I took a broad curriculum. Went to a pretty modest high school. We didn't have AP, advanced placement courses. So, I took the honors classes. I took whatever they threw at me. And I guess, I could say I just graduated kind of a well-rounded kid with the opportunity of what college would throw at me. I was ready to grab it.
Yeah, so you go to University of Pennsylvania and the Wharton School of Business, so fantastic program, obviously. And you graduate with economics and marketing major. So when did you make that decision to focus on those two?
So I applied to UPenn as a total fluke. My sister's best friend from high school and her brother had gone to Penn. I think they were both in Wharton undergrad. I applied because my dad was like, you should apply. I was like, okay, I'll apply. I got into a bunch of other places. I was going to go to Rutgers because, again, we're very modest means. New Jersey has a wonderful state school system. And I was like, of course I'll go to Rutgers. We don't have the means not to. And my parents, to their credit, my mom at that point was working as an admin assistant at a company. And they were like, you got into Penn, you should go to Penn. Like, we will figure it out between like student loans and work study and a little financial aid. It's back in the early 80s. They were like, we will make it work. Like, if you got in, you should go. So I went my freshman year. I went to Penn, and I got to know a lot of people who were in Wharton, some of the upperclassmen that I knew, and I realized like, if I want to do something broadly in business, there's this great undergraduate business school here. I should probably transfer in. And if you get good enough grades your freshman year, it's a pretty easy process. So at the end of my freshman year, I transferred into the Wharton School and started my sophomore year undergraduate at Wharton School, at the Wharton School. And I was very, very fortunate. During my sophomore year, I took like an intro to marketing class, and I loved it. Yeah. I just loved it. And I think what I really loved about it, again, I like pop culture. I like, consumerism, products, all that kind of stuff. But I'm a really tangible person. I feel like I'm conceptual and strategic enough, but like macroeconomics, like things that you can't see, feel, taste, touch are harder for me. Like, I'm a very tactile person, kind of a kinesthetic learner. And so there was something about marketing, the whole like, see the product, what does the product packaging look like? How much do you price the product? Physical distribution in grocery stores, like, sounds so basic, but it was something I could really wrap my mind around. And then I feel like I just really excelled at it. It's funny in hindsight, the classes that you take as an undergraduate business major, I'm not sure I totally agree that there should be undergraduate business majors.
Right.
In today's day and age, different topic. I think maybe a liberal arts education where you really learn how to think and write is probably more important. But I do think when my parents were moving out of their house, I found some of my old notebooks, and we took classes in like Salesforce management and insurance and, labor law, which honestly, when you're 19, you're just memorizing, writing an essay about why you would use a direct Salesforce versus a broker Salesforce. It's just words.
Yeah.
But I feel grateful that I was able to, sort of go deep in marketing. I really liked it, statistics, the whole kind of business background. And then I'm also I was a good student because I worked hard. But I would say on the scale, I'm a much more talented worker and executive than I ever was a student. I worked really hard to be a straight A student.
Right.
And so once I graduated from college, it was my intention, if I could make a good career and never have to go back to school again, I'd be happy doing that.
Right. Yeah. It's so interesting you say that about college, even back in the day. But I was at the University of Kansas. I taught spring semester of January 2023 to May of that year. And I did a sales leadership class.
Yeah.
And, and they literally called me about 18 days before the semester began, said, hey, we need help. We had somebody go out sick, and they had approached me different times. So anyhow, I do the class, but before the class was going to go on, I went to the head of marketing. I said, is the prerequisite for this class, like the sales class?
Yeah.
Like, oh no, you can take either one, doesn't matter. They order. And I'm like, weird. I'm going to be teaching me that I haven't taken the sales class, sales leadership. Didn't make sense to me, but whatever.
Whatever. Yeah. Like I said, it was a lot of, in hindsight, it's funny that I said I couldn't have been pre-med because I could never make it through memorizing all those terms in biology.
Yeah.
And yet I think about, again, taking insurance or statistics, like what's reinsurance? I'm not sure that's the most important thing for a 19-year-old to know. But like I said, I have no regrets because it all kind of, one thing led to another, which led to another. And I'm very grateful. I'm also very grateful in hindsight. My parents, may they rest in peace, like very thankful to them that they were willing to make the sacrifices and do everything that they did, that my sister and I both got to pick where we wanted to go to school.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic. So talk about, I think you got a job at Nielsen marketing research right out of college as account director. So that, that's a pretty iconic company, that especially back in the day of the TV ratings and all that good stuff. But then you navigate over to PepsiCo.
Over to Pepsi.
And have a 24-year career there during the heyday of the cola wars, right? Coke versus Pepsi, and throw in 7-Up and Dr. Pepper and all that stuff. But, obviously we won't go in detail on all 24 years, but talk about the early days and some of your learnings and navigating up some of the fun things you did there.
My first job out of college, and there's a little bit of a learning of open yourself up to possibilities in the universe. So I took a job at a company, it was called Majors, Majers. It was later bought by Dun & Bradstreet while I was there and merged into Nielsen Marketing Research. But it was broadly in the consumer product space. We were the people that tracked the, back when we used to read newspapers and they'd be like, the Kroger ads or the ShopRite ads. And we were the company that tracked the A ads, the B ads, the C ads, and sort of all the money consumer products companies spend on trade promotion. And I would have never thought that I would have worked for a company that nobody knew the name of. I moved to Atlanta. And a friend of mine that I went to college with happened to have researched the company and happened to have taken a job there. And he literally said to me, like, Lori, I think you should, and this is going to really sound like the 80s, put your resume in the slot at career planning and placement for when they come on campus to interview. Again, just a good example. I'll get on it and move to Pepsi, but a good example of you have to open yourselves up to the possibility, and you can't be so pre-programmed, like I'm going to work for a name brand company, I'm going to go to New York, or, and so I ended up going there. It was in Atlanta for a couple of years. I'd never lived in the South before. That was a fun experience. Transferred within that company to Connecticut. They were bought by Dun & Bradstreet, merged with Nielsen Marketing Research. And I had a wonderful mentor at the time, really important person in my life. His name was Bill. And he actually gave me the advice. He was like, Lori, I know you really like it here. And I was an account executive and maybe then an account director, whatever the titles were. And he said, you need to go get client experience. You can't spend your whole life on this side of the business. And it was funny because he was my boss, but he was really looking out for me and what he thought was right for me. And he connected me with some different recruiters. I interviewed at some different companies, had a couple of different job offers. One of them was Pepsi. And it's funny, the other job offer that I had, which was at a company, it was the company that made Dixie cups. I can't remember whether they were James River or whatever they were called at the time. They've gone through different ownership. They actually paid more and they were closer to my home. And it was actually my mentor's wife who said to me at the time, she's like, go work at Pepsi. It's an iconic company and you'll get great experience. You'll meet incredible people. Drive the half hour instead of the 10 minutes. Don't be small-minded. And it was interesting. And she said to me, and I'll never forget this, she said, you'll hate it there. It's a terrible company. It's a terrible, terrible company, but you'll get great experience. And she said, go there for 2, 3, 4 years. I was maybe an assistant or associate, get yourself to the brand manager level, and then you can leave and do whatever you want with your career, but you'll have it in your background.
Right.
And that was, that was late 80s. And then you know how it works. I mean, PepsiCo is a great company. It's not a perfect company, but it's a great company. You know how it is. They're all about, they make soda and chips for a living. Their real asset is they develop leaders. And so they have so much career development, leadership development. And so, it's like you move, you get promoted, you get married, you move, you get promoted, you have a baby, you move, you get promoted, you have another baby. And even though I always interviewed, I always knew my value on the outside, I always stayed at Pepsi by choice. But one day you wake up, you're in your late 40s, you're a senior vice president, you're running a big department. It's kind of incredible how life and career sort of happened. But again, I don't want to make it seem to any of your listeners like, I let it fly by. I was very intentional about staying because at any given moment, whenever I interviewed for another job on the outside, I always felt like, no, I'd rather be here. This is the right place for me. I think the opportunities are great here. And then at some point after 24 years of, I worked in retail, I worked in food service, I worked in marketing, I worked in general management, headquarter marketing, field marketing, innovation, brand marketing, business development. I probably had 12 or 13 jobs over that 24-year period. I had great bosses. I had crummy bosses. I mostly had incredible colleagues, some of which were so great that I wrote a book with years later. And so I feel like it was always such a good experience. And then at the end, culturally, I just felt like it wasn't right for me anymore. It became a little bit more internally focused, a little bit more bureaucratic, which is not really my MO. And I was in my late 40s and I had this realization of like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to go get another job and work someplace else.
Right.
I'm not going to be able to just like stay here till I'm like 55 and get my pension and all that, which would have certainly been one path, as they say. But I say this too. Sometimes I joke with my friends. I'm like, I'm glad it got sort of less fun. I'll say less fun for a while so that it forced me to go get my act together and find another job, because I was so fortunate to do such interesting things after that in my chapter 2. And of course, all that led to my chapter 3 that I'm doing right now. So it kind of, it worked out well.
Yeah. A couple things. What your I think it was Bill,
a
mentor who, I think the difference between a good leader and a great leaders look out for the person as the person versus the employee.
Yes.
So that was a gift. And I think it was Bill's wife that said, go to Pepsi.
Yeah.
That was drive
it
the
was
other.
Good advice. I mean, who knows, maybe if I had gone to, James River, I would have ended up being like the CEO of Dixie Cups or something.
Yeah.
And I'd be like I'd be a Dixie Cup billionaire right now, but, who knows? But I feel like the Pepsi thing in so many ways, so many times over the course of 24 years, and especially the first 21, which were excellent. I just remember thinking, Pepsi's not an easy place to succeed. It has a very definitive culture. It's probably the most performance-oriented company that there is. It's not easy. It's not like, kumbaya, let's all hold hands and tell each other what a great job we're doing. It's a tough place to work. But if you find your right groove there, and again, I think I was there during sort of a heyday, the cola wars, all of that, kind of the heyday of big food, it can be, and it was kind of a glorious place to be. And I felt like as hard as I worked, I always knew that working hard and doing the right things, I had a real sense most of the time that I was there that it was going to work out pretty well.
Right. I worked at Sprint during the telecom wars. So it's, AT&T was the Goliath, and MCI was, had the best marketing, and Sprint, we had the best network. So it was, but we were the 7-Up. They were the kind of Coke and Pepsi.
Yeah.
Did you guys at Pepsi kind of have that, you were number 2, I believe, the whole time? I don't know. That's my recollection. I mean, was there was it a goal to get to number 1, or was it just, let's do the best work possible? What was the kind of the mentality? I'm just curious.
I always said that the best thing about working at Pepsi, and keep in mind, most of the time that I was there was no Amazon and Facebook and Netflix and all of these like big tech giants that there are right now. So the most prestigious companies that people wanted to work for, other than, if you were in banking, was, like Goldman Sachs and stuff like that. But these were like the pinnacle of the kind of companies that people wanted to work for. They were sort of the pinnacle of pop culture and all that. So the best thing to ever happen to Pepsi was that their competitor was Coke. And so what I loved about it was, I mean, who really cares about the cola wars, right? I mean, like, I always say, like, it's not like you're, I'm a cancer survivor, so I can say it's not like we're like curing cancer or anything like that. We weren't trying to fight childhood poverty or anything that actually mattered in the world. But when you work to compete with a company like Coca-Cola, which was a global brand, they were always number 1. I spent about half my career on the food service and hospitality side, where they're 3 times as big as Pepsi. I mean, they are really a number 1 in that side of the business. They have McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's, and they kind of have everything. And so. But it was so great having a competitor like that, because it didn't allow us to get bureaucratic. You couldn't be bureaucratic. You couldn't be internally focused, because you had to spend sort of every dollar and every ounce of energy fighting externally. So we were always fighting for, to answer your question, every bit of market share and trying to be in markets where we could be number 1, trying to be number 1 or have higher growth or whatever. And at the end of the day, obviously, it was about our shareholders, but I think it drove everything we did in the culture. And having an externally facing culture where the fights that you're fighting the fights, again, in the marketplace, that's a great place to work. A company where people have sharp elbows and they're fighting the fight internally and they're putting up bureaucratic roadblocks, like, I don't think that's a particularly fun company to work in.
Right.
So it was great. It was great having such a terrific competitor with such a strong brand name. And, Coca-Cola Company, they're a great company. I mean, the funny part is, when I worked in Atlanta for Majors, my client was the Coca-Cola Company. And so I was at their centennial, I think in 1985-ish. Oh, wow. I was in Atlanta at the Coke Centennial. And then, fast forward 1998, when Pepsi has the Pepsi Centennial, I'm at the Pepsi Centennial.
Oh, wow.
And then fast forward a number of years later, when I left Pepsi, I worked for a time for Keurig Green Mountain, and we did a big venture with the Coca-Cola Company, this Keurig Cold venture. And at one point, our company was 10% owned by the Coca-Cola Company.
Oh, wow.
So I feel like my whole life was
Yeah.
kind of going back and forth in the whole Coke and Pepsi thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a similar culture to Pepsi. We had at Sprint back in the early days. It was just, go, 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 always trying to get market share. I always said, 1 year at Sprint was like 3 years at another company just because of the pace. I mean, I remember 1 year when I worked in consumer marketing, we didn't even have a budget. Like we were just spending money. I mean, obviously, not recklessly, but like we did not have a budget. But it was a startup. So what were some of the big differences? You leave Pepsi, go to Children's Place, and then Keurig Green Mountain. What were kind of the big cultural differences compared to Pepsi?
Yeah, I think one of the things I like to talk about, and there's not a good or bad, but I tell people, again, be conscious of this. So at Pepsi, and I'm not saying this just because I worked in marketing, but the center of the plate function at Pepsi is marketing. Again, it's sugar water, for goodness sakes. Like, it's not a bunch of IP. There's not a bunch of patents.
Right.
Like, it's about people. And, honestly, consumer marketing is the heart and soul of that company.
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Palacio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Palacio, doesn't just create podcasts, he creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Palacio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
And, honestly, consumer marketing is the heart and soul of that company. So I was very fortunate, even though I worked in a lot of different things. I didn't spend my whole time there at all doing brand or consumer marketing, but to work in a company where everybody understands marketing, it's such a consumer-oriented company, is amazing. It has its downfalls, but it's kind of amazing. The thing that was so interesting about the other companies is marketing was not the center of the plate function. So I went to work in retail, and if you know specialty retail at all, the center of the plate function is the merchant or the buyer. It's really about product. And marketing, again, this was 2011 or so. Marketing is much more, it's communications, it's email marketing, it's getting people to the store. But there's no big advertising budgets. I did the first ever consumer segmentation and brand study.
Yeah.
It's just,
you're not getting Michael Jackson to be a spokesperson.
No Madonna, and so marketing, now part of it was sort of fun in that I wasn't the one that was on the phone with the CEO all day Sunday. That was our head merchant. But it was just really interesting to go from a place where marketing was really sort of center of the plate and like the hero function to being where you are a support function is being generous. And then similarly up at Keurig Green Mountain, Keurig is a very, make machines that, make coffee. And so the real center of the plate function at Keurig were the mechanical engineers. I mean, the people who designed and, built our appliances. And even though I ran product management and we technically wrote the product plans to tell the engineers what to build, the real hero function at that company were the engineers and the people who built the product. And my boss, who had come from the Coca-Cola company and from Procter & Gamble, he was really trying with my help to build a real solid global brand management and product management function. Really hadn't existed before. So again, going from Pepsi, which is really all about marketing, or you could say sales and marketing, to a company that's merchant driven, a company that's engineering driven. And then my last corporate job was at Peloton, And Peloton, it's a software company disguised as a bike company.
Right.
And so the hero function there times 1,000 are the software engineers. And so it was just interesting, not just going from being, I was a senior vice president at Pepsi, but there are multiple senior vice presidents at Pepsi.
Right.
So going from being a senior leader to being, C-suite, working for a CEO directly, definitely is very interesting. But I think the bigger thing is actually working at a company where the sun rises and sets on consumer marketing,
right,
to going to a company where you literally have to explain what it is. You have to fight for every dollar. Some people would be happy if you just kind of went away. So that was really, really interesting versus a lot of people leave Pepsi and they go to, Mondelez or General Mills
right,
or Unilever or another consumer products company. Yeah. Not saying it's more of the same, but it's more alike than not alike.
Yeah. Yeah, so interesting. So what made you, I think it was either after Keurig Green Mountain or when you were the interim global CMO for Peloton Interactive, what made you go out on your own and start Courtyard Connections? And I would love to hear the background of why you named it Courtyard Connections.
So it's interesting. When I was at Pepsi, as I said before, I got to a point, I was there for 24 years. I always say 21 of the 24 were magical. And hard, but magical. And then at the end, I was just like, you know what? This isn't fun for me anymore. I'm kind of becoming a little bit of a negative Nancy, which is not my persona at all. And I just knew I had to leave. But in my head, I was like, well, it's because Pepsi isn't fun anymore. And then I went to the Children's Place, which has a very sort of stereotypical retail culture. As my boss once said to me, we're not about building leaders here, Lori. It's retail. I was like, okay, good to know.
There we go.
It's not CPG. We're not about leadership. I was like, okay, thank you.
Okay.
So, that was it was a challenging culture. Again, retail has its own charms and its own things that are challenging. And that was a good, when you have like a breakup romance, it was kind of, I needed to go someplace after Pepsi.
Right.
Leave Pepsi. But it was,
it was your rebound relationship.
It was a rebound relationship. Thank you. It was the word I was looking for. And then I went to Keurig, and Keurig in his own way was kind of magical. I was there during an incredible time. But what I kept finding was my tolerance for, my friend Amy calls it the corporate tax, which is, sort of the part of your job, which is you have to do things that you don't really want to do. It could be budgets. It could be rewriting the OGSM. We did it quarterly and now we're changing it. We're going trimesterly, or, whatever it is, the parts of your job that you just really don't want to do. There's always a corporate tax. And I don't know, pick a number. It's 10% of your time. It's 20% of your time. At some point, you start to get a little more annoyed by the corporate tax. And I felt like it was funny. I didn't notice it so much, but I was feeling that way at Pepsi, then at the Children's Place. Then I went to Keurig, and I remember, again, I had a great boss. It was a great company. It had a very distinct culture. But I remember at one point when we were rewriting the story arc of the product plan for probably the 10th time. And I just remember thinking, I don't really want to do this anymore. Like, normally you would just say, hey, that's part of the corporate tax. You got to rewrite the strat plan a couple times. You got to rewrite the AOP a couple times. But at some point you start to say, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, working is a choice. How I spend my time is really important. And I'm just not jazzed up by this anymore. I don't want to sit in front of the board and be quizzed about what the email open rates are on our Canada emails. Like, I just wasn't jazzed by it. And so when I was at Keurig, I think I had this realization, and it was a little, you said we can swear on this podcast. It was kind of an oh shit moment. Our younger daughter was going off to college. I don't think we had fully funded college tuition yet. My husband's an academic, so I don't think I was quite in the, like, James and I could shake hands and say, okay, you're done, Lori. You don't have to do this anymore. But I knew I needed to get back to Connecticut. I'd been commuting to Boston every week, which is, side note, not great for your life when your family lives in Connecticut. To be in Boston 4 days a week, not great. Our daughter was going off to college. I really wanted to be home. And the oh crap moment was the thing that I've been doing my whole career. The only thing I know how to get paid to do, I don't really want to do that thing anymore. And that really is, again, no trust fund, no family money, no like magical grandparent that was going to
Right.
come in and pay for college and pay off our mortgage or anything. We're like normal people. And so I was like, okay, I have to find a way. I wanted to continue to work full time. I had to find a way to figure out how to get paid to do something that I hadn't done before. And it was a little exhilarating and a little bit terrifying. And I didn't know the term. This was 2015. I didn't know the term portfolio career. But I remember when I was leaving Keurig, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're going to be go be a chief marketing officer back in New York." And I'd say to everyone, "No, I think I want to serve on some corporate boards. I'd like to be an executive coach. I always knew I wanted to do that. And then I'd like to get paid to do keynote speaking." And everyone had the same reaction. They're like, "Oh, I bet you'd be good at any one of those things. Like, how will you do those things?" And I'm like, I have no earthly idea how I will make one of those things happen, let alone all three of them. And, being the world's greatest extrovert, I don't know, 200 different coffee meetings later, you sort of piece together
Right.
how you're going to do this. I took a little side turn and did the Peloton, the interim CMO role at Peloton in 2016, just because it was too interesting to get paid to be the head of marketing for the world's greatest fitness product. Like I had to do it, even though I really didn't want to work for anybody. Yeah. I didn't want to take another W-2 job. It was just it was so in my sweet spot.
Yeah.
And it's at my two people. One is a guy that I used to work with. He said to me, I was trying to figure out if I should take the role or not. And he said to me, really insightful, he said, "Lori, everybody who knows you knows that you're a real health and fitness nut. But if you look at your resume has a lot of soda on it." Right. So he said, "Go work at Peloton, work there for a week, a month, a year, whatever it is, and go do that and push the soda a little further down on your resume." That was one point. And then the second point, in a much more sort of straight shooter way, by that point I had bought a Peloton, and my husband said, "All you do is talk about your effing Peloton bike." He said, "How about you let them pay you to go tell the world about Peloton bikes?" And I was like, okay, good point.
Love it.
So, yeah.
So you had a Peloton before working there.
I bought it literally. The funny story is a recruiter called me about this role. And again, I was done with corporate America. I was really working hard on making this portfolio career happen. She called me. She tells me about Peloton. I never heard of it, which, by the way, side note, was a real problem with their marketing because I am the target audience times 100. I mean, fitness obsessed, time starved. I am their target audience with a house in suburbia with room for a bike. Right. And I'd never heard of it. And so I was just waving off the recruiter, and she did something very smart. She goes, "Give your laptop with you?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Do me a favor, open up a browser and type in, Peloton bike." And I literally, my reaction, I opened up my laptop, I typed in the thing, and I said to her, "Kathy, how do I not know about this? Like, this is amazing. I have been waiting for this product my whole life." I mean, I kind of freaked out. And she said, "So will you take an interview?" And I said, "No." But literally the next day I went down to the Westchester Mall near me and I bought a bike. And so this recruiter, she was very good. She kind of stayed on top of me. And she convinced me to go take a meeting with the CEO. And what was meant to be a 1-hour meeting turned into a 3-hour meeting. And I sort of had that realization about an hour and a half in of like, I'm going to end up working here. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm going to end up working here. Yeah. And so it's kind of how it happened. But it was, I don't know, it was a good note to me, again, back to come full circle about paying attention to the signals of the universe. It was a good note to say, again, I love the product. There is not a product I love more than I love my Peloton bike. I love it even more than I love my Keurig coffee maker. It was a real reinforcement to me of like, I love this product. I believe in the product. I love marketing this product, but I'm really ready to not have a boss and not have a board and not have a 9 to 5 or 8 to 8 job. I'm really ready to start the next thing. And so I think in some weird way, had I not had my last corporate job working to market a product that I believed in so wholeheartedly, maybe I never would have really gotten the memo that it was time to do this third chapter. Right. But it was a really nice way of kind of tying it up in a bow and saying, okay, now I'm really, really serious. I'm going to go make this portfolio career happen.
Yeah, I love that. I'm so fascinated with your band of sisters. You're one of the co-founders.
Yeah.
6 all ex-PepsiCo, Pepsi, female corporate rock stars. They all have fascinating backgrounds. I read, all the bios of the 6 women. I mean, one became the CEO of Pepsi North America, this CMO of ESPN, NFL. CEOs. I mean, and you make gender bias fun. So
we do.
And then the 6 of you wrote a book. You Should Smile More: How to Disassemble Gender Bias in the Workplace. So talk about the formation of that. And my Anderson Cooper, Mike Wallace type question is going to be: how do you do a keynote with 6 people so busy and have a time where you can get an hour and go to a place and give a talk? But anyhow, talk about Band of Sisters.
So the Band of Sisters, so again, I'll hold up the book if it's anything more than an audio medium, how to You Should Smile More: How to Dismantle Gender Bias in the Workplace. So it came together very organically. We were, the very quick story was, we were actually at a dinner with Indra Nooyi shortly after she had retired as the CEO and chair of the board of PepsiCo. We're at a dinner in Greenwich, Connecticut. And it's funny, we just got to chatting about, funny enough, how I was one of the original co-founders of the first ever women's resource network back in 1993 at Pepsi North America, like before I had my kids. And we started, somehow that came up, and we started talking about these little moments in the workplace, these little, we call them now micro moments. Some people would call them microaggressions. But these kind of moments of unconscious bias, these little moments that used to happen, like people calling us girls, or people saying like, oh, you should smile more. You'd be so much prettier if you smiled more, or, just little things, or somebody you'd be in a people planning session and somebody would say, well, yeah, we're not going to offer that job to Joanne because it requires a relocation. Her husband, he's a partner in a law firm in New York. The reverse would never happen. Anyway, we just started talking about these little things. And it's funny, I said this recently on another podcast. What's funny is these women, we had talked about everything, as we told Indra, we complained about you. We complained about Steve, the CEO before you. We complained about having to rewrite the strat plan. Like, we talked about everything. And we had never talked about this one thing. And we all had experienced it. These little moments where you just felt like, kind of like bricks on your shoulders, like little by little, they're not a big deal, but like over time, you're just exhausted by them, like somebody swearing and then they look at you and they go, pardon my French, but they just turn to the woman. They don't talk to, it's just like little things like that where you just feel othered. Anyway, long story, we started talking about this and we did some follow up. And anyway, the long and the short of it is we end up doing a couple of conferences back in 2019. And we did one, I think it was the Ad Club of New York. And we were like, all right, let's just try this out. Let's see if there's a there. We couldn't get off the stage. They're like, all right, just 10 more minutes of questions, 10 more minutes of questions. People had so many questions. It was a, multi-gender audience. And this topic was resonating like crazy. And at one point they said, all right, we just won't have the bio break. Like, we'll let them keep answering questions. Like, it was so just so engaging. And so we set out then back in 2019 and early 2020, and we're like, all right, we'll go on the speaking circuit. And then what happened was COVID happened and all the speaking started getting canceled. And so we said, you know what? We thought we were going to do a bunch of speaking, get a bunch of user-generated content, and then maybe someday write a book. But because we were all stuck in our home for the couple of months that COVID was going to last, we said, during those couple of months, let's write the book. And then once we're out of this quarantine, we'll go on the road. So you know how that went. COVID lasted a little longer than we thought it would. We had time to write the book. And then so we published this book back in 2022, I think almost like exactly to the day, 3 years ago. And we've been out, speaking and talking to corporations and at conferences and all of that. So it's been just an unbelievable experience. The fun, to answer your question, of 6 people writing a book, happy to talk about that, typically when we speak, sometimes we speak the six of us. Usually it's groups of like 3 or 4, sometimes as many as 5. If we're like at a big conference with 1,000 people, we try and meet the moment. But what I would say is it's highly choreographed and at the same time kind of very spontaneous, that we can, we can tease each other, we can build on each other, we laugh a lot, we have a good time. It's a lot of storytelling. But again, if you're going to have 3, 4, or 5 of you, you have to make sure you're pretty choreographed. Otherwise,
Right.
you're tripping over each other. So
Right.
again, we've all, as I always say, we've done, big sales meetings and board meetings and things like that. Like we're pretty well trained in how to be engaging and entertaining in front of a large audience. So now we get to bring that to bear with the Band of Sisters.
Yeah, I could definitely see that from the videos on your website, both on the homepage and the speaker reel. So, and I love how you I think all of the 6 were kind of marketing foundation. So you're all storytellers. I love that part. We're recording in September of 2025. Diversity, inclusion, kind of are not bad words. They're just different words than they were a year plus ago. So talk about that and how it's changed, maybe how you approach your speaking engagements or when you're coaching your clients.
So, this has been an interesting year, and I see it both from the Band of Sisters, I see it in my coaching work, and I see it on the corporate boards in which I serve. In terms of how companies are reacting. Some pretty basic things like taking sort of direct DEI language off of their websites. Certainly if their CEOs have in their performance incentives that they're paid based on any kind of, diversity metrics. If you're a company that has government contracts, if you're a public company, you have to change that. So there's been some kind of foundational changes. We've done 2 things. One is because a lot of the companies that hire us also have government contracts. So I would say we've kind of sanitized, if you will. We've, broadened the language a little bit on our website to make it that we're not putting anybody in danger by hiring us. And what most people have said to us is, I love the content, don't change the content. But I'll tell you 2 things that we've done. And this was happening naturally anyway over the course of the 3 years. We talk about the workplace and we talk about it through the lens of gender bias and dismantling gender bias. But really what we're talking about is leadership and culture. We've been talking for 3 years now to audiences that have both men and women, people of all genders in the audience. We've always been not about calling men out, but rather about inviting them in. And so that feels very natural. So I feel like we've really leaned into this is really about leadership and culture and how everyone can win in the workplace. So I feel like we've just broadened our language a little bit more
Right.
to make it easier for people to continue to come with us. And then the second part is, again, this was a natural thing that was likely to happen, but it just happened in a little more accelerated way, is we also spent this spring and summer developing some new content. So most of our content has been for large audiences. It could be 200 people, it could be 1,200 people in a big group, kind of a big keynote. And we've complemented that by creating some more sort of like seminars or smaller modules that can be done. We can do them on the main stage, but we can also do them in a more interactive kind of smaller group, like a smaller leadership group or as part of a bigger training day. So that's things like the language of high performing teams or the importance of mentorship and sponsorship or kind of the unwritten rules of the workplace. Or we did one recently about navigating performance reviews. So I would say broadly under leadership, culture, winning in the workplace, we've taken our core content, we've broadened it both in terms of language, topic area, and then for people that are nervous by hearing the words gender bias, we're like, let's talk about leadership and culture and everyone winning in the
Right.
workplace. It's the same basic content, what people want to hear, but they just need to know that we're going to deliver it in a way that is not going to make anyone in their company uncomfortable.
Right.
That's okay.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it comes down to leadership and building great cultures. I mean, that's really what we're all trying to do. I'm curious. I mean, obviously, senior vice president of Pepsi, become chief marketing officer, senior VP at Children's Place, chief global strategy at Keurig Coffee. So you're used to speaking in front of large groups and all that. But what was kind of your biggest surprise kind of when you said, oh, yeah, I want to be a keynote speaker? What was kind of like, oh, wow, I didn't know this was going to happen?
Yes. So I love public speaking. I do. It's something that I've always enjoyed. It comes naturally to me. And what's funny is when we do the keynote speaking for the Band of Sisters, and like I said, we've spoken, I'm trying to think of the largest audience, maybe, a few thousand people. We spoke at SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management. I mean, we've done some very big things. And we've spoken everywhere from like the Naval Yard at Puget Sound to these like white shoe law firms to conferences. I mean, sort of everything. The thing I think that is the most surprising is two things. One is everyone's the same. Like, even though every company is different and every company has different cultures, the similarities are so similar. I mean, I joke that we did a big law firm and they gave us a lot of coaching about like, we're very different from your CPG world. And at the end of the day, what they were really saying is that we have partners and senior partners versus VPs and senior VPs. I mean, other than that, it's the same interaction, client-based or whatever. But I think the biggest thing to me, I mean, I still get excited before I go on stage, but I don't get nervous because to me, the biggest difference when I used to present like to the Keurig board or the Peloton board meetings, or when I was at a Pepsi strat plan meeting with our CEO, there was always this sense of people that were going to ask you questions, not so much because they cared about the answer, but because they wanted to know if you knew the answer. And they would ask you questions that had like a right or wrong answer. How many, GRPs are we running of radio in the Dallas market with the Keurig cold launch in April? And you're like, I don't know, ask ChatGPT. I mean, they were just like, there were so many questions that people would ask you. Yeah. What's the beverage incidence at Taco Bell drive-through first quarter versus first quarter year ago? But they were kind of questions to trip you up a lot of the time. And what I love about the Band of Sisters, and the reason I don't get nervous is, first of all, there's such a safety zone that if someone asks a question, I don't know the answer, I can just say, that's a great question. Like, let me turn to my colleagues to see if anyone knows it. Or I'll say, you know what? You've stumped the panel on that. Let me throw it back to the audience. Let me see if anyone has a good call on that. So they're not asking you to recite facts or anything like that. They're asking you a point of view, or what do I do if I have a boss who isn't supportive of this, or I've tried this, what would you recommend? And the absolute joy of being part of, sometimes there's 2 of us, sometimes there's 6 of us on stage, but we're all so different and we have different backgrounds. I mean, one of the other women, Mitzi, she's been an executive coach for probably 10 or 15 years. So she always has an answer just because of her executive coaching experience. She's also a woman of color. She also grew up in sales. So she has a very different background.
Yeah. And she owns a golf tech.
And she owns a golf tech. Katie's a stepmom. C doesn't have children, but she has 3 nieces she's super close to. Angelique and I are both working moms, so we have some perspective, but her husband was a lead dad and mostly stayed home with the kids. So even though we all have estrogen, like we're all women, we're all actually very, very different and have different perspectives. And so what I love is if I don't have a great answer to something between the audience and my colleagues, I never worry that I'm going to get stumped. And like I said, that with the combination of knowing they're asking questions that they actually want to learn, not quiz me. I will tell you, I walk off stage and I am so energized by the experience. So that's a gift. Yeah. It's a gift.
Yeah. It's like an hour on your Peloton. You're pumped.
Oh my God. Yeah, I can't do an hour on the Peloton, but I could go. Sometimes we're up on stage and they're like, do you have time for 5 more minutes of questions? And I'm like, I'll go all day. Just give me a little bit of water and some chapstick. I'll go all day.
There you go. I love that.
Yeah.
Laura, I love helping 2 groups of people. One is that I used to say post-college, but now I even say high school. So if you graduate, you just graduate from high school and or college and you want to start a professional career, what advice do you have for them getting that first job as well as, starting a career?
I'll come back to a theme, which is like be open-minded and sort of like understand where the universe is taking you. I think what's so interesting now and scary, quite honestly, a little bit terrifying and a little bit fascinating is everything that's going on with Gen AI is the advice that we would give people today, think about it, is markedly different than you probably would have given to people. Even 4 years ago, you would have said to every young person, go into STEM, get a job as a software engineer, right? So I think you have to be very sort of agile, learning agile. So that's like one piece of general advice I would give people is you have to pay attention to where the world is going, and the way your parents did it or your older siblings did it is probably not going to be exactly the way you're going to do it. And be open-minded to not necessarily doing it the most pedigreed way, but, be open. But the other piece of advice, I'll steal it from a friend of mine. She has 3 kids in their 20s. And so they're all launched now. But she always said to them, be the anti-millennial millennial. So be the person that shows up more like a boomer that is like, you're grateful to have a job. Yeah. You're always asking for extra projects. You're like, how can I help with that? You're not trying to, if you only have to be in the office 2 days a week, she's like, go in 4 days a week, even if you only have to be there 2 days a week. Yeah. Like, get the FaceTime, volunteer, offer to do more. If there's a big M&A project or biz dev project going on, raise your hand. Offer to do that. Offer to work on a special thing with your VP or your SVP. Like, don't be a person who thinks the workplace owes you something. Be a person that is leaning in to their company and not kind of what boomers think of millennials. Don't be that person. Be the person that is so leaning forward and always wanting to learn and grow. Then it doesn't matter what you do. You'll find a path to succeed in anything. But if you walk in thinking, and I say workplace, and I mean that in the broadest sense, doesn't have to be business. But if you walk in thinking that the world owes you something and that you should get a participation trophy just for showing up, I think in today's day and age, especially with AI kind of, minimizing some of the young hires, I think if you have that attitude that the world owes you something, I don't think you're going to succeed.
Right. Yeah. A great book that just came out this year, The 5 Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom. One of his advice is do the work your boss hates, that doesn't want, they don't want to do that work, and because that will endear you to that person immediately.
Yes,
or do the shit work
yes.
that your boss doesn't want to do. I thought that was great advice.
I think it's great advice. Sometimes I was listening to a podcast recently. I listen to a lot of coaching, like Neuro Leadership Institute and Hogan and a lot of those different, kind of nerdy executive coach type of podcasts. But one of the things they were asking, it wasn't just young people, basically, not so much what are you evaluated on, but tell me what your boss is evaluated on, what your boss's priorities are, the nature of your boss's work. To your point, what does your boss like to do, not like to do, and how will your boss get ahead in the workplace? And they said 50% of the people couldn't answer that question.
Right.
That is inexcusable. As much as you should know all the things for yourself, absolutely understand how your boss is getting evaluated, what their KPIs are, whatever, and be a person that does your own work, but is absolutely, just sort of quintessentially helping your boss do what they need to get done as well.
Yeah, I love that. The second group is, while everyone, even individual contributors, can be leaders, right? But those that want to take that path, that career path, be a first-time manager and have people responsible that they're responsible for in an org chart. What advice do you have for them as they begin that leadership journey?
We were talking before about the difference between working at PepsiCo and other companies. PepsiCo, gosh, did they invest a lot in leadership? I mean, we had first-time manager training, how to do a curbside debrief, how to do a performance appraisal. And we had so much in addition to functional training, how to write a creative brief and things like that. We had so much leadership training. I didn't realize that other companies don't do
Right.
it. And now fast forward, 30, 40 plus years, I think a lot of companies don't even acknowledge that being a manager is a thing. It's just like, oh, congratulations, you have someone reporting into you. So I think the biggest thing when you start to manage people, I mean, great if your company does it, but if not, invest in yourself. You can do it with books and podcasts and things like that. I would just tell people to acknowledge that, you still have your functional job, but being a leader, being a manager is work in and of itself.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, good, I have someone to delegate to. No, you have to take it seriously as like a job in and of itself. And, that's everything from the mechanical things about doing one-on-ones and quarterly deep dive and check-in and things like that, but also understanding servant leadership and how you can expect some, sort of how you can help somebody and what expectations are, all of that. So my big advice would be to take leadership or management, both of them, take it seriously as an end to what you already do, not just like a little tuck in.
Yeah. No, I love that advice. Lori, thanks so much for being on the Corporate Couch. You're a gift. I can talk another couple hours with you, I think, but I just loved our conversation so much. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
We're on a roll with rock and roll and bands and musicians. So last episode, we had Lindsay Howerton talking about being part of Willie Nelson's Farm Aid.
Yep.
And now a good old Jersey gal, Lori Marcus, and I say gal with all respect, talking about, the Jersey legend, Bruce Springsteen.
The man.
The New York legend, Billy Joel, and talked about music and, how many, the badge of honor in Jersey and New York is how many Springsteen or Billy Joel episodes. I'm too focused on podcasts. How many concerts you've been to, not episodes. So
At MetLife
yeah.
or the Garden or something like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The Garden. Yeah. Madison Square Garden. Yeah. Giant Stadium where Bruce, in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. Yeah, but Lori's just phenomenal. I mean, one, she's a workout freak, which I like. She gets up early. She's a big Peloton person and was the global CMO.
Went out and bought a Peloton because, I may interview there. So.
Right. Bought Peloton and became their global chief marketing officer for the Peloton Interactive. This band of sisters, they're like these super women of, corporate America, the ex CEO of Pepsi North America and ESPN, NFL. They all, did all these amazing things, both inside PepsiCo, where they all met and worked together, and now are, doing keynotes, and they have a book on, You Should Smile More as the name of the book about, how to dismantle gender bias in the workplace. So it's just phenomenal. And all her brand experience, you talk about working at the Coke versus Pepsi wars and being, I love her take on brand building. She said, I'm a brand builder, not a marketer. She says brand building is about consistency. It's not one campaign. It's 10,000 tiny choices. Her leadership advice, you can have high expectations and still be kind. I just thought that was a great. And I think she had another quote about no job is too small kind of mindset. This is kind of like workouts, in my opinion. And I think she said something like, if you're only good at the sexy stuff, you'll never build the muscle for the tough stuff. A great, that was just a great moment, quote about, humility, growth, and leading by example, right? Because you do need to do the little stuff, right? And that's what separates, whether it's athletes or leaders, the good ones or the poor ones to the good ones to the great ones, right? You have to be able to do, have the foundational stuff and and you're okay with doing the little stuff. So
yeah. How many industries did you count that she was involved in at one time? Like 30 something.
Well, it was interesting because she was 24 years at Pepsi, but then she was at the Children's Place, a retail, and she was at Keurig, Green Mountain. And then she did a bunch. I lost count of the industry.
It was just a whole bunch of different things like that.
Yeah.
But what I liked is that she had insight both into Coke and Pepsi. That she actually worked at Pepsi, but then she worked with Coke as a client for a while. Right. So she got to see behind the covers the different industries and the different philosophies of those two companies. And I think that it would be interesting to find somebody, and maybe she's the one, that has worked with both of those companies and then write a book and take a topic. I don't know what it is, but say this is what Pepsi does with it, and by contrast, this is what Coke does with it. And I think that would be an interesting book to have. Pepsi is actually a much larger company than Coke is corporately because they have so many other divisions. They have the Frito-Lay and all those other things, where Coke is more just in
beverages.
And Coke, but Coke as a brand is infinitely larger than Pepsi, just absolutely huge. And so the different dynamics that work there. I love the fact that she was talking about when she worked at Pepsi, that a lot of the training and the programs that they had there had nothing to do with Pepsi-Cola, but it was training that, like, how to be a manager. Now that you're a manager, how to be a leader. Or if you are going to be a leader, here's what you can look forward to, or those kind of things that you don't get just anywhere else. And of course, you and I have kind of a Coke and Pepsi relationship, working for so many years at Sprint, which is really neither the Coke nor the Pepsi. It was kind of the RC Cola of the telecommunications.
Yeah, the 7-Up of the telecom wars.
but Sprint had its great moments, and it had its moments where it's like, okay, well, now I know why we're number 3.
Yeah.
So
I asked her about that. Like, did you was it hard to be number 2? And she just said, we didn't really think of it that way. We were just, we knew we had our strengths. I forget her exact answer. And that was our experience at Sprint. Mm-hmm. We didn't oh God, we're number 3. We worked our asses off and trying to make a difference. I don't know.
And they loved the fact that they were competing with Coca-Cola, and that Coca-Cola was such a great competitor that they became a better company because of what Coca-Cola was doing as a competitor. And I think that's an interesting way of looking at things. It was just a really interesting interview, and I loved it.
Joe, what any highlights of the week for you?
Well, one of the things I do for these podcasts and for other things is I look around for witty quotes. And I thought I'd found a brand new Yogi Berra quote that I'd never seen before. But it turns out I'd already heard it. It was deja vu all over again.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.